So in exception handling, right? Yes. So we have seen like how to handle multiple exceptions using one except block. So there is one more block you have, which is called as, so there is one more block. And so what is that block is? So finally block. So there is a finally block. So here finally is not, okay, finally is not exception handler. Finally is not exception handler or error handler. It is not exception handler. It is only a block. Finally is not exception handler or error handler. It is only the block. It is a block. That's it. It is only a block. So generally this finally block is used to deallocate resources. So to deallocate resources allocated within try block. To deallocate the resources allocated within try block. Finally block is not exception handler or error handler. So finally block contains the statements common for try and except blocks. So the statements which are common for try block and the statements which are common for try block and except block that you are writing inside which block? Finally block. Common statements. The statements common for try and except block. You are writing in which block here? Finally block, right? It means finally block is executed. It is not exception handler. I said it is a block. It is a block which is executed after. It is a block which is executed after execution of try block and except block. Try block or except block. So it is a block which is executed after execution of try block, except block. After execution of try block or except block. After execution of try block, except block. It is a block which is executed after execution of try block or except block. So that is what finally block is. So what is a syntax of this finally block is? So you can write a try block and include some statements here. Include some statements like statement 1, statement 2, then except block. So you write exception type, which type of exception it is, and then you write what some statements. Finally block, you can write directly finally block, and this you can include statement 4. Or you can write directly try block, and so generally you never write like this. Statement 1, you can write finally block without except block. Statement 1, statement 2, and then you write finally block by including other statements. By including what other statements? Now this is statement 3. So two syntaxes are there. This is a syntax 1 and this is what your syntax 2. Two syntaxes are there. This is a syntax 1 and this is a syntax 2. Okay. So this is how you are trying to write it. Finally block. So I said, no, this is used for deallocating resources. I said, this is for deallocating resources allocated within what? Try block. Deallocating resources allocated within try block. So for that, you are trying to use what? Finally block. Okay, for that, you are trying to use which block? Finally block. So what is resource allocation? The other one is what? Resource deallocation. Okay, one is resource allocation. The other one is resource deallocation. Okay, now just try to understand this. So just try to understand this, like how this will be worked, right? So resource allocation is there, and one more is resource deallocation is there. Okay, one is resource allocation, another one is resource deallocation. Okay, no problem. Yes. So what is the meaning of this is? For example, assume that this is a try block. Okay, just try to understand this. This is a try block. And inside this try block, assume that resource allocation is, suppose I open connection to what? Printer. Resource allocation is like I just open connection to what here? Printer. So open connection to a printer. Or suppose you open connection to a database. Open connection to what here? Printer. So opening connection to a printer is what here? Resource allocation. Okay. Like you open connection to a database. Opening connection to a database is also what? Resource allocation. Opening connection to a printer is a resource allocation. Opening connection to a database is also what? Resource allocation. So when you open, it occupies certain resources. Like suppose if you open connection to a database side, some memory will be allocated. A database side, some memory will be allocated. So to avoid that, after doing certain operations, you have to close. You have to close these connections. If you don't close the connections, you'll be wasting unnecessarily what? Space. Okay, to avoid that, you have to close it. When you open it, you have to close it, right? Suppose assume that opening connection to a printer, one statement like, now this is allocating resource. Opening connection to a printer is allocating resource. And after opening connection to a printer, what you're trying to do, you're printing a document. You open connection to a printer and then what you're doing, you're printing document. Okay. Assume that opening connection to a printer is successful. Okay. Opening connection to a printer is successful and printing document is also what? Successful. Opening connection to printer is successful, and printing document is also what? Successful. And successful execution of this, what I want is, I want to close which connection? Printer connection. So here, resource allocation, and this is what? Resource deallocation. This is a resource allocation, and this is a resource deallocation. Opening connection to a printer is allocating resource, and closing printer connection is what? Deallocating resource. So this statement is successful, and this statement is also successful. On successful execution of try block, it execute which block? Finally block. And what will happen? It will close the printer connection. Suppose opening connection to a printer is successful, but while printing document, there was an exception. That exception is handled. That exception is handled by except block. So while printing document, there was an exception. Which exception? X exception is there. So there is an exception. What is that exception? X exception. So that is handled by which block here? Except block. Okay. So here I'm saying error while printing. Error while printing. What is that? Document. Error while printing document. This is a message. After executing except block, even it execute which block? Finally block, and close the printer connection. It will execute finally block and close the printer connection. Close the printer connection, right? Okay, so open connection to a printer, and next is print document. Okay, so open connection to a printer is successful. Printing document is also successful. Then on successful execution of try block, it execute which block? Finally block. Opening connection to a printer is successful, but while printing a document, there is an error. So that error is handled by which block? Except block. And even it execute which block? Finally block. Open connection to a printer is successful. While printing a document, there is an error. And that error is not handled by which block? Except. Suppose while printing document, there is a Y error. Which error? Y error. But here we are handling which error? X error. But while printing a document, which error? Y error. But here we are handling which error? X error. Here we are handling which error? X error. So is it that error is handled or not handled? Not handled. If the error is not handled, your program is what? Terminated. But before terminating, it execute which block? Finally block, where it will close the printer connection. Where it will close the printer connection. Means resources are very important, right? Resource is very important. Resource is one of the important thing, right? So resource deallocation must be done. Because of that, finally block is executed. Finally block is executed either on successful execution of try block, on unsuccessful execution of what? Try block, it execute finally block. Okay, normal completion, exception is raised, exception is handled or exception is not handled. Okay, it will try to execute which block here? Finally block. It will try to execute which block here? Finally block. Okay. Okay. Yes. Now you have to understand this. Yes. So finally block, a simple example. Now this is very much useful in application development. Okay. Now we'll try to see with a simple example, but you learn more on this. Like once you move to, you learn more on this once you move to what do you call it as databases, files. Okay, you learn more on this. But now just try to understand how this try and how this try and finally blocks are works. Okay, for example, now what I'm doing is, this is a function main, and here I'm trying to display the message. What is the message inside? Which block here? Try block. And n1 equal to integer of input. Enter first number. Enter first number. N2 equal to integer of input. Enter what is that? Second number. Enter first number. Enter second number. N3 equal to n1 divided by n2. And then print the value of which one? N3. So then followed by except block, I'm trying to say zero division. So zero division error. So which error are you handling? Zero division error. Okay. So error cannot divide. What is my message here? Cannot divide. Cannot divide the number with what here? Zero. So cannot divide a number with what here? Zero. So except block with which error? Zero division error, and you are trying to display the message. What is that message? Cannot divide a number with a zero, and then followed by finally block. And I just write inside which block? Finally block. And here also I display the message inside which block here? Except block. And after execution of this, now this is rest of the statements. So these are rest of the statements, and I call which one here? Main. So once you run this, now you can see the message inside try block, and is asking to enter the first number. The first number is 5, and the second number is 2. What is the first number I've given? 5. So the value of n1 is a 5, and the value of n2 is what here? 2. And 5 divided by 2 is what here? 2.5. What is the value here? 2.5. 2.5, and inside which block? Finally block and continue. Miss, is it any error in try block? Is it any error in try block? No, there's no error in what? Try block. On successful execution of try block, is it executed finally block or not? Yes. And continue the rest of the statements. The next what I'm doing is I'm trying to enter. Okay, number 1 is 5 and number 2 is what? 0. Now the control is moved inside the try block, and what is the value of n1? 5. The value of n2 is what? 0. Now 5 divided by 0 rises which error? 0 division error. Is it 0 division error is handled or not? Yes. So I'll get cannot divide number with 0, and inside which block? Except a block. And will it continue finally block or not? Yes. It will execute finally block saying inside which block? Finally block. Inside finally block. Now once I press enter, you can see 50 cannot divide number with what? 0. And inside which block? Except the block. Inside which block? Finally block. And then what is that? Continue. So continue the rest of the statements. Continue the rest of the statements, right? Now suppose I try to execute again. Say I'm trying to check in different scenarios. Now I try to input the value of n1 is 5. Now 5 is converted to what? Integer. I try to input the value of number 2 is ABC. Now can you convert this ABC to integer here? No. You cannot convert this ABC to what here? Integer. Then integer function raises error. Which error it raises? Value error. But is it value error is handled here? No. Value error is not handled. If it is not handled, your program is terminated or not? Yes. But before terminating, it execute which block? Finally block. Before terminating, it execute which block? Finally block. Now, what is the message inside? Finally block. And is it your program execution is stopped or not? Yes. Huh? Throw. Java. That is Java. Don't mix Java, Python. If you want to throw, you use throw. You want to throw, you use throw. But here integer function throws. Huh? Java, don't mix Java, Python. Jython. So if you want to generate exception, there's no throw. Okay, right? Now this is how you are trying to do. Now this is different scenarios, but execution of finally block is compulsory. Okay, because resource deallocation is important. Because of that, always you write the statement which has to be executed irrespective of what? Exception. Then you write that code inside which block? Finally block. You write that code inside which block? You try to write that code inside which block? Finally block. Okay, now just try to understand this. Finally block. So finally block is executed. Okay, finally block is executed in the following situations, or in the following conditions or situations. One is normal execution of try block. So without raising any error. So try block rises. Second one is try block rises an error which is handled by which block? Except block. Normal execution of try block. Second one is try block rises an error which is handled by except block. And third one is try block rises an error which is not handled by which block here? Except block. And when forced exit occurs using written statement also, it execute which block? Finally block. See, finally block is executed in the following scenarios. So normal execution of try block means the try block. Okay, normal execution of try block means the try block which doesn't raise any errors. So try block rises an error which is handled by what? Except block. It execute finally block. And try block rises an error which is not handled by except block. Even it execute what? Finally block. Even when you forced exit occurs using which statement? Written statement. Even it execute which block? Finally block. So in all these scenarios, it execute what here? Finally block. But I'm saying no, finally is not exception handler. So it is only for deallocating resources. But generally, in application development, you never read this syntax. But this syntax is there. That's not because Generally, you write a try block to handle errors or not? Yes. So you always write a try block with except block and then followed by which block? Finally, blocks, right? Okay, next one is, now finally block is executed in all these scenarios. Now you can generate the exception. You can generate the error. You can generate the error or you can generate the exception. How you can generate the error? By using one keyword. And what is that keyword is? Rise keyword. Okay, so Python will provide one keyword. What is the keyword it provides here? Raise keyword or rise keyword. So it means you can write some conditions. You can write some conditions here. You can write, suppose if you see this, integer is there. Okay, integer is a predefined or user defined, predefined. And to this integer, I'm giving some input, right? To this integer, I'm giving some input. Integer of 65. What is the input given to the integer here? 65. So integer function receive this 65 and convert the 65 into which type? Integer type. Okay. Now if I'm saying integer of within double quotes 45, so it will receive this 45 and verifies. Is it the string contain number or not? If it is having number, it converts. Suppose in the same way integer, if I'm giving ABC, integer and ABC, now I try to give ABC to what here? Integer. So integer will convert this ABC to what? Integer. But is it this input which is given to this integer is valid or invalid? Invalid. Then who will raise an error? Integer function raises error. So integer is a predefined, right? Now integer, who raised this error? This error is raised by which function? Integer function. Which error is raised here? Value error. Okay. In the same way, I develop my own functions. In the same way, I develop my own function. I develop my own function. And if any input given to my function is wrong, if any input given to my function is wrong or invalid, then my function should raise what? Error. Then how a function can raise the error? By using which keyword? Rise keyword. So rising is nothing but generating, right? Now this keyword is yours. This keyword is yours to generate exception, or error. This keyword is yours to generate exception. This keyword is yours to generate exception. This keyword is yours to generate exception or error. Generate exception or error. How? Explicitly. Generate exception or error. How? Explicitly. This keyword is used to generate exception or error. What? Explicitly. Explicitly you are generating error by using which keyword? Raise keyword. Explicitly you are generating error by using which keyword? Raise a keyword, right? So rising is nothing but creating. So generating error or exception is nothing but creating which object? Error object. And giving to which one? Python virtual machine. So what Python virtual machine look for? Error handling. So the advantage of exception handling is even separating business logic and what? Error logic. Advantage of exception handling is separating a business logic and what error logic also. Not only avoiding abnormal termination of program, you're separating business logic and error logic. For example, integer function is there. Integer function is having only the logic for conversion. But is it integer function is handling any error, which is it integer function is handling errors? No. Integer function is not handling any errors. Integer function is having a logic to convert. If any mistake done by the end user, then integer function is handling that errors or generating error. Then who will handle this error? Callers. Who will handle this errors? Callers. Caller. The caller who call this integer function will handle the error. So it means caller is handling the error by writing which logic? Error logic. So function is having only which logic? Business logic. But that might be various. Error handling might be various from one caller to another. The error handling logic might be various from one caller to what? Another. So that is where there is a clear separation of business logic and what? Error logic. So function raises error, but function is not handling the error. Integer is not handling error. Integer is raising the error if you give wrong input. It can handle the error. If you give wrong input, it can handle what? Error. But error is not handled, but generated. So why it is generated? Because handling this error might be various from one calling place to what? Another. So that is a separation of business logic and what? Error logic. So you write your own business logic. Okay, you write your own business logic. And if anything against your business logic, what you're trying to do, you're trying to generate what? Errors. But how you are writing, generating error by using which keyword? Rise a keyword. For example, you're trying to use a rise keyword. For example, I'm writing I write one function called, I write my function called multiply. So what is the name of my function here? Multiply. There is a function called multiply, and this function receives how many values here? 2 values. Now my logic for multiplying is, for example, my logic for multiplying is, I should not multiply. My logic for multiplying is, I should not multiply two numbers. I should not multiply a number with a 0. My logic is a number should not multiply with 0. But actually you can multiply the number with what? 0. But my logic is I should not multiply number with what? 0. So if you give the input, either n1 value is 0 or n2 value is what? 0, then multiply function should raise what? Error. But how it is raising error? Using raise keyword. Throw in Java, rise in Python. Okay, so rise keyword. Rise, which error you want to raise it? Which error you want to raise it? Which error you want to raise it? Which error? I should raise one error, right? Error is one class. Error is one class or not? So I'm raising which error? Which error I'm raising? Value error. I'm raising value error. But is it value error is a predefined error class or user defined? Predefined error class. Otherwise, what I have to do? I have to return n1 into what is that? N2. Okay, now this is only business logic, right? Is it multiplying is handling the error? Is it multiplying is handling the error? No. Multiplying is not handling the error. Multiplying is what here? Raising the error. Multiplying is not handling the error. Multiplying is what? Raising an error. Okay. Yes. What is that error it is rising? Value error. Then this is a function main. Then who will handle this error? Caller. So try block. Then number one, integer of input, enter which number? First number. Number two, integer of input, enter what is it? Second number. Then number three, number three equal to what is that function? Multiply and giving two inputs, that is number one and number two. Then I'm trying to print number one. Okay. Number one, number two, and one more is what? Number three. Then except block, which error here? Value error. Who will raise value error here? Multiply. So here there is some confusion or not? Yes, because multiply function rises which error? Value error. Integer is also rises which error? Value error. Because here we try to use predefined error or not? Yes. So here, if I write a message, cannot multiply number with, cannot multiply number with what? 0. Because multiply function rise which error? Value error. Is it value error is handled or not? Yes. Cannot multiply number with the 0. Cannot multiply number with what here? 0. Right? Cannot multiply number with the 0. Once you run this, so enter first number. The first number is 5. Second number is 2. Now 5 into 2 is what? 10. Execute it. Enter first number 5. Enter second number is what? ABC. Enter first number is 5. Second number is what? 0. So the input given to the multiply. Number 1 is a 5. And number 2 is what here? 0. N1 is 0. No. N2 is 0. Yes. Rise which error? Value error. Is it handled or not? Yes. Now cannot multiply number with what? 0. Okay. In the same way I run this again. At this time, enter 5. Enter 5. Okay. And then, so first number is 5. First number is 5. And second number is what? ABC. Is it ABC is converted to integer? No. Rise which error? Value error. But what is the message I'll get? Cannot multiply number with 0. But actually, the input is wrong, right? But here, there is a problem. What is the problem? Int is using value error and multiply also using value error. So because these errors already used by, this error types already used by Python library. Because this is user defined, right? And this error types are already used by which one? Python predefined functions. So when you build your own function, you also build your own error. When you build your own function, you also build your own error type. When you build your own function, you also build your own error type. You also build your own error type, and that error type, you call it as what? Custom errors. That errors are called as which errors here? Custom errors are the same thing. You call it as user defined errors. That custom errors, or it is also called user defined errors. Okay, so when existing errors, when existing error, okay, when existing error, custom error, or user defined error type. So why you build your own errors? Why you build your own errors? Because the existing errors, why you build your own errors? Because existing error types are used by which functions? Library functions. In one program, I'm writing my own function and library function. So there will be ambiguity or not? Yes. To avoid that, instead of using existing error types, you build your own error types. Instead of using existing error types, you try to build your own error types. Instead of using existing error types, you build your own error types. You build your own error types. And that you call it as what? User defined error. So every error is one class. So every error is one class. Every error is one class, or it is one data type. Every error is one class, or it is one data type. So every error class is inherited from one class. What is the name of that class? Is a exception class. So exception is a root class. Exception is a root class for all classes, all error classes or error classes in what here? Python. Exception is a root class for all error classes in what here? Python. Every error is one class or data type. Every error class is inherited from which class? Exception class. Exception is a root class for all error classes in what? Python. Is a root class. Exception is a root class for all error classes in what? Python, right? So every error is one class or data type. Every error class is inherited from which class? Exception class. Exception is a root class for all error classes in what here? Python, right? So how can you do this? So this is a syntax of creating a user-defined syntax of creating user-defined error class. Because every error is one data type, right? So how you are writing it? You are writing like this: class error class name, and inherit which class here? Exception class. And here you can write your own variables and what? Methods. You can write your own variables and what here? Methods. No problem, right? For example, in this case, in this example, if we say multiply, in this example, I'm trying to build my own error class. What is that error class? Multiply, zero multiply error. Zero multiply error. And zero multiply error inherit from which class? Exception class. So what is the name of my error class here? What is the name of this error class here? The name of my error class is zero multiply error. What is the name of this error class here? Zero multiply errors. Okay. Now this will inherit. Now this will call the constructor. This will call the constructor of which class? Superclass. So what you're trying to do is you are saying super dot what you are saying is super dot. You're calling which one? Init. Okay, now what is the name of the error here? 0 multiply error. If n1 equal to 0 or n2 equal to 0, you should raise which error now? Should raise which error now? 0 multiply error. Should raise which error here? 0 multiply error. Now here, now this main function is able to handle both errors. One is input must be what? Integer. This value error is raised by which function? Integer. But multiply function raises which error? 0 multiply error. Is this 0 multiply error is a predefined error or user defined? User defined. It is a user defined, right? I'm writing except block 0 multiply error. 0 multiply error. So print cannot multiply number with what? 0. 0 multiply error, and you're trying to print a message. That is what? Cannot multiply number with what? 0. Now once you run this, now enter first number, which is 5. Fine, no problem. Enter first number. Okay, A, B, C. Input must be integer. Value error. Okay, 4. Input value is 0. So it raises which error? Multiply error. 0 multiply error. And this is a custom error or not? Yes. So when you build your own logic, then you also build your own error types. You also build your own error types. And that error types, generally you call it as custom error types or user defined. That error types are called custom error types or user defined error types. Okay, now this is the message what you are trying to, yes. Now you have to execute multiple times here. So this is first one is successful, and like that. You have to execute multiple times to check whether input is valid or invalid. You have to check multiple times to validate whether input is valid or invalid. Multiple times you have to do it. Only 0, because our logic is number should not multiply with 0, right? Our logic is number should not multiply with what? 0. So what is our logic? Number should not multiply with the 0. Okay, right? Now these are the different things, right? Now next is, suppose assume that you are developing, suppose some login function is there. For example, so there is a login. Now login is receive the input like username and what is that? Password. Now there is a users dictionary is there. There is a So there is one dictionaries. Okay, like registered users dictionary is there. And this contain username. This contain username and what is that here? Password. So this contain username and password. So it is having username and password, right? So it is like this. There's a username and there is a password. Like this, you have a usernames and passwords. So this is a login. So what login will do is, it will try to find, okay, you try to get the existing password, right? Suppose login read the username and what? Password. Suppose if the username is there, if a user, if user in a registered user list, then what do you do it? You read which one? Password. You read the password. Okay, you read the password by saying register user of, what is the key here? User. And if password equal to existing password, then you are saying return print, what is that? Welcome. Welcome user. Else you are raising an error. What is that error you are raising? Login error. If username also not there, you are raising an error. Which error you are raising? Login error. If password is invalid, you are raising which error? Login error. If username is invalid, also you are raising which error? Login error. But is it login error is a predefined error or user defined error? User defined. You write it. Login error is an exception. Login error is an exception, right? So login error. So I call to inherit all the properties. You must call the init method of which class? Super class. What is the super for this login error? Exception. Now, what is the input I have to give here? What is the input I have to give here? So within the try block, I have to input what? Username. So input. What I have to input here? Username. Then what I have to input here? Password. I have to input two values. One is a username and one more is what? Password. Then I should call the function login by sending this username and what? Password. Now this login function receives the username and password and verifies. If the username and password is valid, what will happen? It will display welcome user. Otherwise, it writes which error here? Login error. So you are handling that by saying except block, which error? Login error. And here I'm saying invalid username or what? Password. Invalid username or password. So you are trying to display the message. But error is raised by which function here? Login function. So who's handling that error? Caller. Who's the caller here? Main. Who's the caller here? Main. So once you run this, now here is asking to input username. Now username is Naresh and password is NIT123. Now there's a message, welcome Naresh. No mistake is done. Username is Suresh and password is S123. Welcome Suresh. So there is a Kiran and K123. Now raise one error. Invalid username or password because Kiran is there but password is K321. But what I entered here, K123. Is it this is valid or invalid here? Invalid. So immediately it is given invalid username or password. Invalid username or password, right? So this is how you are trying to build your own error types. This is how you are trying to build your own error types, that you call it as what? User defined error types. So just try to understand, like, to work with the exception handling, Python doesn't have more. There is a try block, and there is a except block, and there is a finally block, and there is one more keyword called which one? Rise. So rise is another keyword. Okay. So this is what is this now? Exception handling. Custom errors, user defined errors. Try except finally. Okay. Yes. The next we'll see another chapter which is called as regular expressions. Okay, now next we'll talk about regular. So regular what here? Expressions. This is another chapter. So what is a regular expressions and what is the need of regular expressions? Regular expressions are the same thing is called which module? RE module. Regular expressions are the same thing is called what? RE module. See, RE module comes with Python software. You don't require to install this. RE module comes with the Python software. Okay. RE module comes with the Python software. So there is no batch. Currently, there is no batch which is running OOPS concept. Okay. You have to wait for 1 month to start OOPS. Okay. So RE module comes with the Python software. Why you are using this RE module is used for working with which one? Regular expression. Now this is very important, like regular expression is used in NLP. When you're working with machine learning, right? You try to work with NLP, natural language processing. Okay, NLP, like when you're building a chatbots, even you try to take the help of, when you're building a chatbots, even you try to build or you try to use regular expressions. You try to use regular expressions when you're building a chatbots, right? But what is regular expression is? Regular expression is a special string. Regular expression is what here is a special string. What it will define? A search pattern. It will define what? Search pattern. You're searching a pattern. You're searching a pattern within a string. Hybrid hierarchical. Yes. You're searching a pattern inside a string. You are searching one pattern within the string by using regular expressions. So before this person is asking hierarchical. Okay. There is a class A. Class A, this is hierarchical, is having M1 method. So this is M1 of which class? A class. Hierarchical means if the class is inherited, if more than one class inherit from same class. So M2 of which class here? B class. There is a class C is there. Now C. B and C both are inherited from which class? A class. B and C both are inherited from which class? A class. Now this you call it as which inheritance? Hierarchical inheritance. Now, if I create, see, these are individual. Now, obj B equal to B. Obj C equal to what here? C. But B and C are belongs to same parent or not? Yes. So these are siblings, right? Of which one? A. So OB is a B dot M1. OB is a B dot M2. OB is a C dot M1. OB is a C dot M3. But here one property, one method is a common, right? This method is common for B class as well as what? C class. Now this is a parent having how many children? Two children. Okay, so same behavior is inherited or not? Yes. So this you call it as which inheritance? Hierarchical inheritance. You have to try here. Okay, M1 of A, M2 of B. M1 of A, M3 of what? C, right? So this is hierarchical inheritance, Ganesh. You don't try here. You have to try. Everything means what is there in hierarchical is only organizing here. Is only organizing of classes. It is only organizing of classes. The way how you inherit, how many classes you are inheriting, based on that, we'll say it is hierarchical, hybrid. Okay. Suppose hybrid is there. Hybrid means how you write it. So this is A inherited by B and inherited by what? C. I take class D inherits B and C. Okay, inherits B and what is that? C. Now this is hybrid. Multiple types are there, right? This is multiple inheritance and this is single level inheritance. And this is also having which one? Hierarchical inheritance. Okay, now. Suppose here I write a method called M4. See the way how you organize the classes. M4 of which class here? D class. So D inherits B as well as what? C. And B from B and C inherited which class? A class. Multiple types of inheritances are there. OB is a D. What do you do it? OB is a B. M1 you can call. M2 you can call. M3 you can call. You can also call which one? M4. A, B, C, D. But how A is inherited from B and C? So this is hybrid. Hybrid means multiple. If you have a multiple types of inheritances to organize the classes, then you are saying it as which inheritance? Hybrid inheritance. Okay, nothing this thing here, but you have to write only the example, right? How you try to organize it based on that, right? So this is hybrid and what is that? Hierarchical inheritance. Now let us move into regular expressions or RE module. So what is regular expression is? Generally, what is regular expression is? I said no, regular expression is a string. Regular expression is nothing but a string which define what? Pattern. It will define what? Search pattern. You want to search some patterns within the string. You want to search for some patterns within the string. Then you are searching or you are matching some patterns. For example, Inside the string, I want to find a email address pattern. One string is there, within that email address is there. I want to search for one pattern. How email address pattern will be name at the rate domain name .com.in. That is one pattern or not? Yes. I want to search that pattern within the string. How I define that pattern? I define that pattern by using what? Regular expression. So what regular expression define? A pattern. What kind of pattern you want to search within the string? That pattern you are representing it in the form of one expression, and that expression is called what here? Regular expression. Okay. Now anyway, tomorrow we'll see how to work with this regular expressions, right? So today we'll stop it here and tomorrow we'll continue this. No, within 2 weeks it will be over. 2 weeks, only 2 weeks, it will be over.